"Sir, step away from the seat." The command landed sharp and public. Not a question. Not a clarification. A decision already made. The aisle froze. The low hum of the aircraft seemed to drop an octave as attention snapped forward. Conversations died mid-sentence. Screens dimmed. Hands stilled on armrests. Daniel Brooks stood half-turned toward the window, his carry-on upright at his side, his boarding pass folded neatly between two fingers. He did not move. "This is first class," the flight attendant continued. "You're not supposed to be here." Her name badge read Claire. The smile she had worn moments earlier, while greeting other passengers, was gone. In its place sat something firm, practiced, unquestioning. Daniel slowly turned his head toward her. "I am," he said calmly. A few passengers leaned forward. Claire blinked once. "I beg your pardon?" "This is my seat," Daniel said. 2A. He gestured subtly toward the empty window seat beside him. The seat was untouched. Seatbelt neatly crossed. Screen dark. No bag. No jacket. No sign of prior occupancy. Claire followed his gesture, then laughed lightly. Not amused. Dismissive. "That seat is reserved," she said. Daniel didn't argue. He raised the boarding pass slightly. "Seat 2A," he repeated. "My name is on it." The cabin shifted. A man across the aisle folded his newspaper. A woman 2 rows back removed her headphones. Someone exhaled sharply, impatient already. Claire took the boarding pass. She scanned it once. Her expression didn't change. She scanned it again. Then she tilted it, as though the angle might reveal something new. "This doesn't make sense," she said. Daniel said nothing. "First-class tickets don't get mixed up," Claire continued, her voice rising just enough for the surrounding rows to hear. "Not like this." A murmur moved through the cabin. Agreement without words. Daniel felt the weight of it settle on him, the unspoken conclusion forming. Claire looked at him again, longer this time, from his shoes to his sweater, from his hands to his face, lingering where doubt lived. "Sir," she said, lowering her voice, "economy boarding is still in progress." Daniel's posture didn't change. "I boarded with my group," he replied. "My seat assignment is correct." Claire inhaled slowly. Then she stepped closer, close enough that the aisle narrowed. "I need you to step aside," she said. "You're blocking the aisle." Daniel glanced behind him. The aisle was clear. No one stood waiting. No one needed to pass. "I'm standing at my seat," he said. Claire's jaw tightened. "You're delaying boarding," she said. The word "you" landed hard. Someone behind him muttered, "Unbelievable." Daniel didn't turn. Claire reached up and pressed the call button above the seat. The chime cut through the cabin. "I need assistance at the front of first class," she announced. The phrase carried authority. Finality. Daniel remained where he was. He had learned long ago not to explain himself when the explanation would be ignored. He had learned that calm, unsettled people more than anger. He had learned that standing still in moments like this made others uncomfortable. Claire crossed her arms. Her body blocked the seat now. A physical barrier. Passengers watched openly. No one pretended not to see. A woman in a tailored coat stared with thinly veiled curiosity. A man near the bulkhead leaned into the aisle. Phones stayed down, but attention sharpened. This was no longer a misunderstanding. It was a test. Another attendant approached. Male, broader shoulders, tablet in hand. His name tag read, Mark. He took in the scene in seconds. Daniel standing, Claire rigid, empty seat, stalled boarding. "What's going on?" Mark asked. Claire answered immediately. "He's in the wrong cabin," she said. "This boarding pass is incorrect." Mark extended his hand. Daniel passed him the card without comment. Mark looked at it, then at Daniel, then at the seat. "You're assigned to 2A?" Mark asked. "Yes." "Last name?" "Brooks." Mark nodded and turned to his tablet. He scrolled. Once, then again. The muscles in his jaw shifted. Claire leaned closer. "Well?" she asked. Mark didn't answer. He scrolled further, more slowly. The silence stretched. Daniel could feel eyes pressing into his back. A man behind him whispered something to his companion. Mark stopped scrolling, zoomed in. His expression changed, subtly. "What?" Claire asked. "There's an entry," Mark said carefully. "For who?" Claire snapped. "For Brooks." A ripple moved through the cabin. Claire waved a hand dismissively. "That doesn't mean anything," she said. "Names repeat." Mark didn't respond. He scrolled again, then paused. Longer this time. Something tightened in his face. Daniel noticed. So did Claire. "What is it?" she demanded. Mark hesitated. "This passenger," he said slowly, "has a priority designation." Claire frowned. "Everyone in first class is priority." Mark shook his head slightly. "Not like this." Claire stared at him. "What does that even mean?" Mark glanced at Daniel again. This time his gaze held something different. Not suspicion, calculation, respect. "I need to check something with the captain," Mark said. Claire laughed once, short, sharp. "For him?" "Yes," Mark said. "For him." And then he turned and walked toward the cockpit. The silence he left behind was heavier than before. Boarding remained frozen. Claire stood stiffly beside Daniel, her arms crossed, her confidence no longer absolute. Passengers shifted in their seats. Impatience crept in. A man 2 rows back leaned out and said, "Are we waiting on this?" Claire ignored him. She avoided Daniel's eyes now. Busy hands, forced calm, but the control was slipping. Minutes passed. The captain did not emerge. Daniel remained standing, still, unmoving. A woman across the aisle whispered, "What's going on?" A man muttered, "This is ridiculous." Claire glanced toward the cockpit again, then back at Daniel. "You might want to step aside," she said quietly. "Just until this is sorted." Daniel shook his head once. "No." The word was calm, final. Claire's eyes widened. "You're refusing a crew instruction?" she asked. "I'm refusing to leave my seat," Daniel replied. The distinction mattered. The cabin fell silent again. Claire inhaled sharply. "That can become a problem," she warned. Daniel's voice didn't change. "It already is." What none of them knew, what no one in that cabin could see, was that Daniel Brooks wasn't just listed on the manifest. He was buried deep inside it, under restricted flags, under clearance notes, under a designation rarely used. And when the captain opened that file, every assumption forming in first class was about to collapse. But not yet. For now, Daniel stood exactly where he belonged, and the plane waited. The silence did not break. It thickened. Boarding remained stalled, the aircraft suspended in an unnatural pause, as if the plane itself had become aware of the tension lodged in its aisle. Daniel Brooks stood exactly where he had been left. Not defiant, not aggressive. Still. Passengers shifted in their seats, discomfort spreading in small movements, crossed arms, adjusted jackets, restless legs. The kind of discomfort that came from witnessing something that felt wrong but inconvenient to acknowledge. Claire remained beside him, close enough to assert control, far enough to avoid eye contact. Her posture was rigid now, arms folded tightly across her chest, chin slightly raised. The confidence she had shown earlier had thinned into something brittle. The authority was still there, but it was being held together by refusal rather than certainty. A man in the front row cleared his throat. "Is the flight delayed?" he asked, no one in particular. No one answered. A woman near the window whispered, "Why is this taking so long?" Another voice followed, sharper this time. "Can someone deal with this already?" Daniel did not respond. He stared straight ahead, not at Claire, not at the passengers, but at nothing in particular. His breathing was slow and even. The calm unsettled them more than resistance would have. Claire glanced toward the cockpit again. Still nothing. She shifted her weight, then leaned slightly closer to Daniel. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," she said under her breath. Daniel didn't look at her. "I'm standing at my seat," he replied. She exhaled sharply. "You could have just stepped aside," she said. "We wouldn't be here." Daniel turned his head then, slowly. "This is where we are," he said. The words were quiet, but they landed. Claire's lips parted slightly, then pressed together. She looked away. Time stretched. The plane's hum filled the gaps where conversation had once lived. A man behind Daniel leaned forward and whispered, "They're going to remove him." The word "remove" carried weight. It floated through the cabin and settled like a verdict. Someone else whispered, "I hope not." Another voice followed, less sympathetic. "Well, rules are rules." Daniel heard all of it. He did not react. Claire straightened suddenly as footsteps approached. Another crew member appeared from the galley. Senior, older, sharper eyes. Her name tag read, Linda. She took in the scene quickly. The stalled aisle, Daniel standing, Claire tense, passengers watching. "What's going on?" Linda asked. Claire spoke first. "There's an issue with a seat assignment," she said. "He's refusing to move." Daniel turned slightly toward Linda. "I'm standing at my assigned seat," he said. "Seat 2A. Linda studied him, not casually, deliberately. She looked at his face longer than necessary. Then she extended her hand. "Boarding pass," she said. Daniel handed it over. Linda examined it carefully. She read every line, checked the barcode, checked the name. She glanced at the empty seat, then back at the pass. Her expression did not soften. "This seat is reserved," she said. "For me," Daniel replied. Linda's eyes narrowed. "For someone," she corrected. The correction mattered. Daniel felt it. The implication was clear. She handed the pass back. "Sir," Linda said, "we're going to need you to step out of the aisle." Daniel did not move. "I won't," he said calmly. Linda's eyebrows lifted. "You're refusing a crew instruction?" "I'm refusing to give up my seat," Daniel replied. Linda inhaled slowly. The patience in her expression thinned. "This situation is escalating because of you," she said. Daniel's voice remained steady. "This situation started because of an assumption." The word hung in the air. Assumption. Linda's jaw tightened. "Sir," she said, "I don't have time for this." She turned to Claire. "Call ground support," she instructed. Claire hesitated, then nodded. The word ground rippled through the cabin. Removal. Security. Authority reinforced. Daniel remained still. The call went out quietly, but its effect was immediate. Passengers straightened. Some leaned back, distancing themselves. Others leaned forward, invested now. A woman whispered, "This is getting serious." A man muttered, He should have just moved. Daniel heard that too. Linda turned back to him. "This is your last chance," she said. "Step aside voluntarily." Daniel met her gaze. "I am not breaking any rule," he said. "I am seated in first class. I paid for this seat. I am listed on the manifest." Linda's eyes flickered at the last word. "Manifest." "You don't get to see the manifest," she said. Daniel didn't smile. "I don't need to," he replied. Linda studied him. Harder now, as if searching for something she could use. "You're being disruptive," she said. Daniel shook his head once. "I am being questioned," he replied, publicly, without cause. The cabin fell silent again. The word publicly landed. Linda straightened. "This conversation is over," she said. "You will comply." Daniel did not raise his voice. "No," he said. The word was calm, unmovable. Claire's eyes widened. Linda's expression hardened. She turned sharply toward the galley. "Where is the captain?" she demanded. No answer came. Minutes passed. The pressure mounted. The aisle had become a stage. Daniel could feel the collective impatience pressing in from every direction. He could also feel something else. Uncertainty. The longer this lasted, the less confident the crew appeared. Linda paced once, then stopped. She looked at Daniel again. "You don't look like someone who belongs up here," she said before she could stop herself. The words slipped out, quiet, but audible. The cabin froze. Daniel felt the shift immediately. The unspoken had been spoken. He turned fully toward her. "What does that mean?" he asked. Linda's eyes flicked around. She realized what she had said. "That's not what I meant," she said quickly. "It sounded like what you meant," Daniel replied. Claire looked away. Passengers exchanged glances. No one spoke. Linda cleared her throat. "I mean," she said, choosing her words carefully now, "there are protocols." Daniel nodded slowly. "And I am following them," he said. Linda didn't respond. She gestured sharply to Claire. "Get the captain," she said. "Now." Claire hurried away. The silence deepened. When the captain finally emerged, the atmosphere shifted instantly. Uniform crisp. Expression controlled. Authority personified. He stopped at the edge of first class and surveyed the scene. Daniel standing. Crew tense. Passengers watching. "What's going on?" the captain asked. Linda spoke quickly. "We have a passenger refusing to comply with crew instructions regarding seating." The framing was deliberate. Daniel waited. The captain turned to him. "Sir," he said evenly, "what seems to be the issue?" Daniel met his gaze. "I'm being denied my assigned seat," he said. "Seat 2A." The captain looked toward the seat, then back at Daniel. "May I see your boarding pass?" Daniel handed it over. The captain examined it briefly, then handed it back. He turned to Linda. "Manifest," he said. Linda hesitated, then nodded. She pulled out her tablet and handed it to him. The captain scrolled. Once. Twice. His expression changed. Slightly. Then he scrolled further. Longer this time. Daniel watched carefully. The captain stopped. Looked up. Then looked at Daniel again. This time, differently. The captain straightened. Linda noticed. "What is it?" she asked. The captain didn't answer immediately. He handed the tablet back. Then he spoke. "This passenger is cleared," he said. Linda frowned. "For what?" "For this seat," the captain replied. Claire returned just in time to hear it. Her face drained slightly. "But," Linda began. "There is no issue with his ticket," the captain continued. "He is assigned to 2A." The cabin exhaled collectively. But the tension did not disappear. Linda stared at the captain. "Then why the priority flag?" she asked. The captain's jaw tightened. "That's not for discussion," he said. He turned to Daniel. "Sir," he said, his tone different now, "please take your seat." Daniel did not move immediately. The pause was deliberate. Then he nodded once and sat down. The leather seat accepted him easily. Perfect fit. The irony was not lost on anyone. But the damage had already been done. The eyes still lingered. The whispers did not stop. The injustice had occurred. Publicly, slowly, deliberately. And everyone had seen it. Daniel fastened his seatbelt calmly. Claire stood frozen nearby. Linda avoided looking at him. The captain addressed the cabin. "Thank you for your patience," he said. "We'll resume boarding." As he turned away, Daniel spoke. Quiet. Clear. "Captain." Captain paused. "Yes?" "This didn't need to happen," Daniel said. The captain met his eyes. "No," he replied. "It didn't." And with that, he walked back toward the cockpit. The plane began moving again. But the silence lingered. The kind that waits for consequences. The silence did not lift when Daniel sat down. It settled. He fastened his seatbelt with deliberate care, the metallic click sounding louder than it should have in the stillness. The leather seat cradled him perfectly, wide and unresistant, as if it had been waiting the entire time. Around him, first class pretended to resume normalcy. Pretended. A man unfolded his newspaper again, but did not turn the page. A woman stared at her dark screen, without touching it. Someone reached for a glass of water and stopped halfway. Eyes lingered. Not openly. Not anymore. But long enough to confirm what everyone felt. Something had shifted. Claire remained standing in the aisle for a moment longer than necessary. She looked at Daniel. Then away. Then down at her hands. Linda stood a few steps back, her posture rigid. Her authority intact on the surface, but fractured underneath. The captain disappeared into the cockpit. The door closed. Softly. Too softly. The plane resumed boarding. But the rhythm was off. Announcements resumed, voices cheerful and detached, but the cabin no longer absorbed them the same way. The earlier confidence of first class had been replaced with an unease no one wanted to name. Daniel stared forward. He did not look at the passengers. He did not look at the crew. He listened to the hum of the engines, to the footsteps passing him, to the silence where conversation should have been. The pressure built quietly. Claire resumed her duties, mechanically. She assisted another passenger with a bag, smiled too brightly, nodded too often. Her movements were precise, almost rehearsed, but her eyes avoided Daniel completely. Linda whispered something to another attendant near the galley. Short, urgent. Daniel caught fragments. Unnecessary. Shouldn't have. Manifest. The word surfaced again. Manifest. It hung in the air like an accusation. Daniel's fingers rested loosely on the armrest. Still. Relaxed. He had done nothing wrong. And everyone knew it now. That knowledge unsettled them more than the confrontation had. Because now, there was nowhere to place the blame. The cabin doors closed. The familiar thud echoed. Safety demonstrations began. Routine. Predictable. But even those felt strained. The flight attendants' voices lacked their earlier confidence. Eyes darted more often. Hands fumbled slightly. Daniel watched Claire as she demonstrated the oxygen mask. Her smile was fixed. Her eyes hollow. She avoided his row entirely. The plane pushed back from the gate. Movement returned, but the silence stayed. As the aircraft taxied, Daniel felt it again. That pressure, the kind that came not from threat, but from anticipation. He knew this phase well, the moment after public injustice, when everyone waits to see if consequences will follow. He had lived through enough boardrooms, courtrooms, and closed-door meetings to recognize it. This was not over. Not even close. The plane reached cruising altitude. Seatbelt sign off. Service resumed. Claire approached Daniel's row cautiously. She stopped at the aisle. Her posture stiffened. She cleared her throat. "Would you like a drink?" she asked. The question was neutral, professional, but her voice was tight. Daniel turned his head slightly, met her eyes. "Yes," he said. "Water is fine." She nodded quickly. No apology. No acknowledgement. She returned moments later, placed the glass on his tray without comment, and moved on. The glass trembled slightly as it settled. She had not noticed. Daniel did. Minutes passed. The cabin slowly loosened. Whispers resumed. Low. Careful. A man leaned toward his companion and murmured something Daniel couldn't hear. A woman glanced back at him, then quickly looked away when their eyes nearly met. Linda remained near the galley, her attention split between duties and something else. Calculation. She spoke quietly into her headset. Daniel heard only one word clearly. "Captain." The pivot came quietly. Not with a confrontation, not with an announcement, but with movement. The cockpit door opened again. The captain stepped out. This time, he did not stop at the front of first class. He walked down the aisle, toward Daniel. The cabin noticed immediately. Conversations died. Heads turned. The captain stopped beside Daniel's seat. He did not raise his voice. He did not gesture. "Mr. Brooks," he said quietly, "may I speak with you?" Daniel looked up at him, measured, calm. "Yes." The captain gestured toward the galley. Daniel unbuckled slowly, stood. The aisle cleared instinctively. Passengers leaned back. The walk felt longer than it was. Every step measured. Every movement watched. They stopped just beyond the galley curtain. Out of sight, but not out of mind. The silence in first class thickened again. The galley was tight. Metal walls. Muted lighting. The captain turned to face Daniel. His expression was no longer neutral. It was careful. "I owe you an explanation," he said. Daniel waited. "I reviewed the manifest," the captain continued. "In full." Daniel said nothing. "There were notes attached to your name," the captain said. "Notes that should have been handled differently." Daniel's gaze remained steady. "They weren't," he said. The captain nodded once. "No," he agreed. "They weren't." He paused, then spoke again. "You are listed as a restricted access executive consultant," he said, "with authority to audit flight operations under federal partnership." The words landed quietly, but their meaning was heavy. Daniel did not react. The captain continued. "You were cleared to travel anonymously," he said. "Your presence was not to be announced. Only the cockpit was notified." Daniel nodded slightly. "That part worked," he said. The captain exhaled. "The rest didn't," he replied. Silence stretched between them. "What happened in the cabin," the captain said carefully, "should never have occurred." Daniel met his eyes. "But it did." "Yes," the captain said. "It did." Behind the curtain, first class waited. The absence stretched. Passengers shifted, speculated, felt the gravity of being excluded from something important. Claire stood rigidly at her station. Linda paced once, then stopped, then turned sharply when the captain re-emerged. Daniel followed. They returned to the aisle. The captain did not immediately move away. He addressed Linda first. "Step aside," he said quietly. Linda did. Instantly. The command did not require repetition. The captain turned to Claire. "Claire," he said. She straightened. "Yes, Captain?" "After landing," he said evenly, "you and Linda will remain on board." The words were calm, measured, final. Claire's face drained of color. "Yes, Captain," she replied. He turned to Daniel. "Mr. Brooks," he said, louder now, but still controlled, "I apologize." The word landed hard, publicly, clearly. The cabin heard it. Daniel held the captain's gaze. "I accept the apology," he said, "but not the behavior." The captain nodded. "As you should," he replied. He turned to the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "thank you for your patience earlier. We experienced an internal error. It has been addressed." The phrasing was precise. No blame, no details, but enough. The captain returned to the cockpit. Daniel sat back down. The cabin exhaled, but the revelation had already spread. Not through words, through posture, through the way authority shifted, through the way Claire would not meet Daniel's eyes again, through the way Linda avoided his row entirely, through the way the captain had spoken his name. Respectfully, formally, publicly. Daniel fastened his seatbelt again. The click echoed. This time, it felt different. Service resumed, but the hierarchy had changed. Claire moved through the cabin like a guest in someone else's space. Her voice softer, her movements restrained. Passengers watched her now, measured her. The earlier confidence gone. A man across the aisle leaned back and whispered, "Did you hear that?" His companion nodded. Another whispered, "Who is he?" Speculation spread quietly. Not curiosity anymore. Recognition. The flight continued. Meals were served, drinks refreshed, but the undercurrent remained. Daniel ate slowly, methodically. He did not rush. He did not hide. He existed, fully, unapologetically. And that was enough. Near the end of the flight, turbulence hit. Light. Brief. Seatbelt sign on. The cabin stiffened instinctively. Daniel remained calm. Claire moved quickly, securing carts. Her hands shook slightly. Linda steadied one of them. Neither spoke to Daniel. They didn't need to. The message was clear. As the plane began its descent, the captain made an announcement. Routine. Professional. But his final words carried weight. "Thank you for flying with us," he said. "We appreciate your trust." The word trust lingered. After landing, the seatbelt sign remained on. Passengers stood anyway, eager to leave, to escape the discomfort. Daniel remained seated, calm, unmoving. Claire and Linda stood near the galley, waiting. The captain emerged again. He did not look at the passengers. He looked at Daniel. "You can disembark at your convenience," he said. Daniel nodded. "I will," he replied. The cabin cleared. First class emptied quickly. Eyes avoided him as people passed. No one spoke. When the aisle was empty, Daniel stood. He took his time. He retrieved his bag. He walked forward. Claire stepped aside without a word. Linda did the same. Daniel passed them, without looking back. When he reached the jet bridge, Daniel paused briefly. He did not turn. He did not need to. The silence behind him said everything. He walked on. The pressure released. But the impact remained. Because the manifest had changed everything, not by what it revealed, but by what it exposed. Effort. "Both of you," he said evenly. "Come with me." They followed. Not because they were ordered, but because they understood. The conversation that followed did not involve shouting. There was no dramatic firing, no raised voices, just facts, timelines, protocol. The captain spoke plainly. What occurred was not a misunderstanding, he said. It was a failure of judgment. Claire stared at the floor. Linda kept her eyes forward. You were not wrong because the manifest proved him important, the captain continued. You were wrong because you treated him as unimportant before you knew anything at all. The words settled heavily. This airline does not operate on assumptions, he said. Or at least, it is not supposed to. Silence followed. The kind that forces reflection whether one wants it or not. An internal review will follow, the captain said. Both of you will submit written statements. Training will be reassessed. No threats, no drama, just consequence. And that, somehow, felt heavier. For Claire, the cost was immediate. She went home that night and did not sleep. She replayed Daniel's stillness, his refusal to explain, the calm way he had stood his ground without aggression. She realized something that unsettled her deeply. If he had yelled, she would have felt justified. If he had argued, she could have dismissed him. But he hadn't. He had simply existed. And that was what exposed her. The next weeks were difficult, not because of punishment, because of awareness. Claire began to notice things she had never noticed before. Who she questioned, who she trusted, who she smiled at easily. Patterns emerged, uncomfortable ones. There was no single moment of transformation, just a slow, grinding realization that the system she operated in had shaped her more than she had ever acknowledged, and that knowledge carried a cost she could not unpay. For Linda, the cost came differently. She had always considered herself fair, experienced, beyond bias. That belief had been a source of pride. Now it felt fragile. She reviewed the moment again and again. The way she had escalated instead of paused. The way she had framed Daniel as the problem instead of the situation. She had used language carefully, professionally, and still it had carried harm. That realization followed her into every interaction afterward. She found herself hesitating, questioning, reconsidering. It slowed her down, and that, too, was a cost. For the airline, the cost was procedural. An internal report circulated. No names leaked, but the incident became a case study. Not of racism, not officially, of assumption-based escalation. The phrasing was sanitized, but the lesson was clear. Training modules were updated, scripts rewritten, scenarios added, because the company understood something important. Incidents like this did not begin with malice. They began with comfort, and comfort, left unexamined, became liability. For the passengers, the cost was quieter. Some forgot the incident by the next flight. Others didn't. A few replayed it in their minds, the way they had watched, the way they had judged, the way they had remained silent. Those passengers carried the cost into future moments. When they saw someone questioned unfairly, when authority overstepped, when silence felt easier. Not all of them spoke up next time, but some did. And that mattered. For Daniel, the cost was layered. He arrived at his destination on time. He attended meetings. He completed his work. From the outside, nothing appeared disrupted. But moments like this did not end when the plane landed. They lingered. They accumulated. They reminded him that credibility was still conditional, that respect still came with prerequisites he had not chosen. The cost was not rage. It was vigilance, and vigilance was exhausting. He thought about the silence in first class, the way it had turned on him, then turned away. He understood something deeply. Most people did not need to believe the injustice was deserved. They only needed to believe it was inconvenient to challenge. That realization did not harden him. It clarified him. Weeks later, Daniel would be asked about the flight, casually, in passing. Someone would say, "I heard something happened." He would not dramatize it. He would not embellish. He would simply say, "I was questioned for occupying my seat." The simplicity unsettled people, because it forced them to fill in the gap themselves. The true moral landing of the story was not that the manifest changed everything. It was that the manifest only confirmed what should never have been questioned. Daniel did not become worthy when his status was revealed. He had been worthy when he stood in the aisle, still, calm, human. The cost of the moment was not just borne by those who acted. It was borne by those who watched. Because silence had weight, and weight always left an imprint. In the end, no one applauded. No one confessed publicly. No dramatic justice unfolded. Instead, consequences rippled outward in quieter ways. In training rooms, in private reflections, in altered behavior, in discomfort that refused to disappear. That was the real cost, not punishment, but awareness. And for Daniel, the moral was not redemption, it was resolve. He did not need the world to change overnight. He needed it to notice, to pause, to hesitate before assuming. If that moment on the plane accomplished even that, then the cost, however unfair, had not been wasted. Because the true consequence of injustice was not conflict, it was erosion. And the only thing that stopped erosion was attention. The story does not end on the plane. It never does. It ends where you are. Because moments like this are not rare. They are simply unfinished. Unfinished until someone notices. Unfinished until someone remembers. Unfinished until someone decides what they would do differently next time. Daniel Brooks walked away from that flight carrying something familiar. Not victory, not closure, responsibility. Because every time injustice happens in public, it leaves behind a question. Not for the person targeted, but for everyone who watched. You saw what happened. You heard how calm he was, how controlled, how measured. You saw how authority tightened its grip before it loosened. You felt the silence. That silence was not empty. It was full of choices, and every choice mattered. Some people in that cabin told themselves it wasn't their business. Others told themselves the crew must know better. Some felt uncomfortable but stayed quiet. A few felt relief when the captain intervened. But relief is not the same as responsibility. And silence is not neutrality. Silence always takes a side. This story is not asking you to be loud. It is asking you to be awake. Because the next time may not involve a manifest. The next time may not involve a reveal. The next time, the person standing there may not be protected by clearance, status, or authority. They may only have their dignity. And dignity is fragile in rooms that confuse power with correctness. So here is the question this story leaves you with. Not who was right, not who was wrong, but what would you have done in that cabin? Would you have looked away? Would you have waited for someone else to intervene? Would you have accepted the explanation because it was easier than questioning it? Or would you have noticed the imbalance before it escalated? Would you have questioned the assumption instead of the person? Would you have recognized injustice even when it wore a uniform? Stories like this exist for one reason: not entertainment, not outrage, awareness. Because once you see the pattern, you cannot unsee it. And once you cannot unsee it, you are responsible for what you do next. If this story made you uncomfortable, that's the point. If it made you pause, that's the work. If it made you reflect on a moment you once ignored, that's growth. Now here is the truth. There are thousands of stories like this. Some end quietly, some end badly, some never get told. This channel exists to give them a voice. To slow moments down long enough for the truth to surface. To hold power accountable, not with noise, but with clarity. If you believe stories like this matter, if you believe silence should be challenged, if you believe dignity should not depend on appearance, then don't just watch, subscribe. Because every story you support tells the algorithm that these moments deserve space. Like this video. Because it pushes the story to someone who may need to see it before they make the same mistake. Share it, because someone you know has been in that aisle, or stood watching it, and never talked about it. And most importantly, leave a comment. Not to argue, not to perform, but to answer one simple question. What would you have done in that cabin? Your answer matters, because stories change culture one witness at a time. This wasn't just a flight, it was a mirror. And now that you've seen it, the choice is yours.